Tharindu and welcome to yet another special episode of Banter with TA. Now in this episode, we are taking a look at one of the main wars going out there in the world. And I'm not talking about the COVID-19, but I'm talking about the oil price wars. We see the oil prices plummeting, then rising again. What's going on? What's happening? Is the COVID-19 affecting it, or are there other factors at play? Let's find out. Now as we all know, oil is one of the main energy sources of the world. USA, Saudi Arabia, Russia are some of the top oil producing nations. OPEC is a 14-member country organization which consists of some of the main petroleum exporting countries in the world, like Saudi Arabia, which is the de facto leader of OPEC, and then Iran, Iraq, and so on. OPEC Plus was an agreement between the OPEC countries and another 10 countries, including Russia and USA, where they agreed to have an agreement on how the oil supplies will be regulated and how they will keep the prices stable around the world. Now, just like in wine and whiskey, you get different blends in oil as well. You may have heard of the WTI, the Brent crude, and so on. Now, just to give you an example, WTI, Western Texas Intermediate, is the type of oil that you mainly get in Texas in USA, whereas Brent crude is the type of oil you get from a mix of 15 different oil fields in the North Sea. But for worldwide crude oil prices, the main benchmark will definitely be the WTI. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic creating pandemonium and panic and chaos around the world, especially in the business world, we saw so many industries coming to a standstill. The passenger airlines are no longer flying, taxis have come to a halt, the big transportation companies are suffering, and even the production is not operating at the level that it used to be. Now with all this happening, one of the first things to drop was the global demand for oil. The on average per day oil demand used to be around 100 million barrels per day. Now in April already we have seen that dropping to about somewhere in the range of 80 million barrels per day. That's a 20% wipe off from the market. Now, even though things will pick up in a few more months, it's estimated that by December 2020, the overall worldwide demand, the daily demand for oil, would drop by about 5.43 million barrels per day. Now that is a huge shock to the oil demand, and how the suppliers adjust and react to it will decide the impact on the price. So what essentially happened was the OPEC Plus organizations or the countries tried to come into an agreement and to cut the oil production worldwide. And what did Saudi Arabia do? They said fine, but they wanted other countries like Russia to accept more production cuts and to take in more of a hit, and then through that to try and reduce the overall oil production. To which Russia completely said no, they don't want to do that. And what was Saudi Arabia's response? They wanted to play hardball. They wanted to prove to Russia that if they don't play by their rules, that they can really bring down the oil prices and affect them. And Saudi Arabia glutted the market with cheap oil. They provided a lot more oil. Just to give you an example, for the month of April, they have promised their customers, Saudi Aramco, the main company that produces oil in Saudi Arabia, they have promised their customers to supply 12.3 million barrels per day to the oil market. Now, just to give you an idea, that is way more than the amount of oil that they can really drill and extract from their oil fields. So which means they are going to take more supplies that they have already stored in other countries like Japan and Netherlands and supply that also to the market, just to send a message to the Russians. But is Russia really affected by this? Well, sort of, because 43% of their GDP definitely depends on oil, but they also have a very strong manufacturing sector. And also, if you look at the budget revenues, for Saudi Arabia, 90% of their budget revenues depend on oil exports, whereas for Russia, it's around 82%. So the effect that this will have, how this affects both countries and the effect it has on both countries, one might say is almost the same. But the basic laws of economics always say that when the prices go down, the only way to make the buck is by supplying more. Now, then comes the question of the availability of additional capacity for producing more oil. Now, that's where Russia might be strongly affected in this case, because Russia's spare oil production capacity is around 500,000 barrels per day, which for Saudi Arabia is between 1.5 million and 2 million barrels per day. So clearly, when the price goes down, when you need to supply more to the market, Saudi Arabia is in a way better position than Russia. So with so much of excess supply in the market and the market being glutted with all this additional oil, we never know where the prices are really going to end. Now, from the oil prices being in the 60s range few months ago, already it has hit the 20s range multiple times in this month. And what's interesting also is that in the past, yes, we have had much bigger drops of oil prices. In the 2008 financial crisis, the oil came down from 147 all the way down up to the 30s range. However, that was not the same scenario as this. We are looking at a macroeconomic environment with the pandemic situation, which we are not quite clear or sure when it's going to turn or return back to normalcy. There's also another point to be considered here. With so much of oil being supplied to the market, with excess supply being there, countries, especially the landlocked countries in countries like Europe, they are struggling with the capacity. There is no capacity for them to store all this extra oil. And very soon, as some economics and business intelligence reports are noting, they do say that governments might be paying money to the citizens to take away the extra oil that they have. Now, one country though is playing it smart, and that's China. China is buying a lot of this excess oil supply at cheap rates, hoarding it for future use. And being one of the first countries to come out of the pandemic situation, they could definitely be in for an economic revival of their own. With so much of oil supply also being available, they could really be dictating some terms, may not be worldwide, but at least within the Asian region. And that's it for this week's Biz Banter special edition on the oil market. I hope you found it useful. And no matter what business you are in, stay busy, stay indoors, stay safe. We will overcome this.